Do you see a man wise in his own eyes? There is more hope for a fool than for him. What is ideology? It's a term that has been cast around the net quite forcefully over the last few years, especially with the rise of Jordan Peterson's particular perspective on things. But what is it exactly? That is a difficult question. You see, for the word ideology to possess a definition, an ideology of some form must be in place within which to place it. Roughly speaking, an ideology is a set of beliefs, a system of ideas, ideals, and positioning of values upon the scale of existence. So right there, if we accept this definition of ideology, we have slipped into an ideology, albeit one less obtuse than the way the word is generally used now. To experience the world with any degree of understanding, even at the level of yes and no, a very basic, binary way to process incoming information, requires some level of distinction between one thing and another, else there would be no distinction. Consuming this information that is being presented to you required at some point in your development for you to be, in essence, brainwashed into the things I am presenting as holding value so that they can be transferred between parties. So you can perhaps see then why a life devoid of values at any level would be a difficult one to navigate smoothly. Somewhere, somewhen, a distinction was drawn between the old, foundational, primary, and essential ideologues, such as general ethics and morality. For the majority, these are consistent across cultures, excluding extremism. Primarily due to their enduring natures, these have been unlabeled as ideologies and recast as truth and reality, or whichever term you would prefer to submit. From what we can tell through reviewing historical events, these too have not always been as exact in nature as they are currently, and can be expected not to be so in an equal time into the future. Shifts in morality and ethics have occurred, our understanding of reality has shifted too, which suggests then that these essential ideologues too are not fixed truths, simply ones that have existed for longer. For example, if the Axis had defeated the Allies entirely during World War II, or Stalin and the Soviets had triumphed and overturned the world order, or cannibalism had emerged as a panacea for immortality, or even gravity had not been identified, would the exact framework that we deem as good and proper now still be in place exactly as it is? This is unlikely. But this understanding of ideologies as evolving narratives constantly open to challenge is a thing that allows one to survive more ardently than another. Time is a very strong stone with which to whet your blades against, so this enduring nature can be used as a tool to distinguish the good from the bad ideologies. The only way to convincingly believe the folly of an ideology is to see it played out and gather the resulting data. Unfortunately, many proposed ideologies can be predicted to not permit the data gathering required to judge them adequately, and so preemptive judicial methods must be applied via existing information. This is a foundation upon which the conservatives versus liberal mindsets can be structured. The conservatives, whilst old and archaic, have proven themselves to be reliable and enduring, whereas the young liberals are violent, unproven radicals who can only be tested by comparison to the failed attempts that exist within the conservative history. It will be difficult then for a youth to identify itself as a Marxist, with entirely positive intentions, to be perceived through any lens except the failed Marxist attempts through history. So then, if you refuse to accept these untested ideologies, you must instead revert to the older ideology. This is not an optional decision for the conscious being, as the mind works as a tool of unconscious learning, being able only to be loosely aimed rather than controlled exactly. It is possible for one to exist without ideology, but those are the people who exist without a conscious essence, with no drive or desire to move towards or away from any place at all. This may be seen as something akin to nihilism, but even that is an ideology at base level, despite the narratives layered above it. A belief in nothing is still a belief in something. To be devoid entirely of belief would be to be unconscious, at least on the level of value forming. Dreams express our ideologies far clearer than our words, because only the dreamer can interpret those without outside influence, surely. Not so. A dream itself is the filtering of concepts, raw and without context through whichever framework has shaped the dreamer to the stage of dreaming. A person can possess very many thoughts and ideas, but how many of those can that person fluently interpret into expressible words? Certainly not the entirety in a form exactly like the original. Their dreams and concepts will be pushed through filters to which they seem to fit most accurately to that person, and so, if the dreamer is dreaming through a mind shaped entirely by a clear, defined ideology, The transition of dreams into words from within the lexicon of the ideologue will be more fluent than for one who pours dreams into an unshaped mind. Then we can presume that an individual lacking in clarity or direction will present a less coherent, pointed opinion of things experienced and expected. Those with clearly defined values can much more explicitly express their opinion of a thing compared against their more developed, robust scale of values. A person without value will appear apathetic, and their lack of values will present distinct from a value system that opposes another, instead ambiguous and without invested direction. So what is ideology? Ideology presents a map for which to orient oneself through experienced reality. Some maps certainly withstand the passage of time better than the others, yet this does not prove them to be true or correct, only more supportive of the traveller. Do we need them? It is, to my thinking, impossible to experience without the involvement of an ideology. We can dismiss those newer, shallower representations of reality quite easily given the existing narratives, but those, the stories dug deepest within our existence, are ones which perhaps cannot and should not be shifted for us to continue a life of valued experience. Despite this necessity, we should not entirely mask them as truth and reality, instead simply narratives that to this point have endured.